Petty Officer Second Class Jess Weller had been told the briefing room on USS Callaway was reserved for admirals and fleet commanders, not for junior ratings assigned to run the projector. She had been told that twice, in fact, once by the duty chief and once by the lieutenant who handed her the cable bag and pointed her below deck without making eye contact. She understood the message. Set up the screen, sit near the wall, do not speak, do not look at anyone for too long. She set up the screen. She sat near the wall. The briefing room below deck on Callaway was narrow and windowless, lit by recessed fluorescents that gave everything a slight blue cast. The long table, the 8 chairs arranged on the Admiral's side of it, the single chair on the opposite side that faced them all. Weller had set up screens before, in rooms like this one, for presentations about readiness reports and logistic cycles. She had never been in a room that felt the way this one felt at 0750, 10 minutes before anyone sat down, when the air itself seemed to be bracing. What she was not told was whose career was going to end in that room before the hour was out. Rear Admiral Rowe entered at precisely 0800. He was a square man with silver bars at his collar and a voice that had never, in Weller's estimation, come close to uncertainty. He sat at the head of the table, arranged his folder in front of him, and looked at the woman sitting alone on the far side of the table as though she were a minor administrative problem he had already solved. The woman was Lieutenant Kira Aldrin. She was 28 years old. She had dark hair pulled back in a service bun, no ribbons on her chest, and nothing in front of her on the table except a single sealed data drive the size of a deck of cards. She did not look at the Admiral. She did not look at the panel arrayed on either side of him. 8 officers in service dress, all senior to her. She looked at the center of the table, her hands flat on the surface, and she was still in a way that Weller had never seen anyone be still in a room full of people who wanted something from them. Rowe opened his folder. "Lieutenant Aldrin," he said, and his tone made the rank sound like a temporary condition. "You have submitted a classified analysis report to this command on 4 separate occasions. The report purports to reconstruct a maritime incident at Grid Position Hotel 79er 14 months ago, using sensor logs and signals intercept data from the night in question." He turned a page. "Each submission has been returned to you as unsupported. Each time you have resubmitted, without revision, without additional evidentiary basis, and without authorization from your chain of command. The review panel has been convened to address 3 findings: that the data in your report is fabricated, that your conclusions are analytically unsound, and that your repeated unauthorized submission constitutes insubordinate conduct." He set the folder down. "Do you have anything to say before the panel reviews the record?" The room was quiet except for the low vibration of the ship's generators running somewhere below the floor. Lieutenant Aldrin looked up. She looked at Rowe with the same expression she had worn since she sat down. Not defiant, not afraid, not pleading. Level. The way an instrument is level. "6 words, she said. Rowe blinked. "I beg your pardon? I have 6 words to say before the panel reviews the record." She lifted her hands from the table and picked up the data drive. "I like to put this on the screen." A murmur moved through the panel. One of the senior officers, a captain on Rowe's right, leaned in and said something Weller couldn't hear. Rowe raised a hand to quiet him. "The record already contains your report," Rowe said. "We don't require a presentation." "The record contains my summary," Aldrin said. "It doesn't contain the drive. The drive has been reviewed. The drive has been logged as received and returned each time with the report," she said. "It has not been opened." She said it the way someone states a measurement, not an accusation, just a number. "I'd like you to open it." Rowe looked at her for a moment with the particular expression of a man deciding whether to be annoyed or amused. He decided on neither. He nodded once, and Weller understood that the nod meant, "Let her make her case so the panel can reject on the record." Aldrin rose, walked to Weller's side of the room, and handed the drive over. Her hand was steady. Weller's, as she took it, was not. The screen lit up. The first thing it showed was a time-stamped sensor log from 14 months ago, the kind of automated recording that runs on every naval vessel every hour of every day and is never looked at unless something goes wrong. The timestamp read 0217. The position coordinates matched Hotel 79er exactly. The second thing it showed was a signals intercept, not a summary. The raw feed, annotated, with the frequency identifiers and the time codes, and in a column on the right, Aldrin's own technical notes, 311 of them, each one dated, each one cross-referenced to a specific sensor reading. The third thing was a 14-page technical reconstruction, not a theory, a timeline built from the sensor logs and the intercept feed that showed exactly what had happened to Hotel 79er at 0217, 14 months ago, down to the minute. Weller did not know what had happened to Hotel 79er 14 months ago. She was 21 years old, and she had been aboard Callaway for 7 weeks, and nobody had told her. But she watched the panel read it. She watched the commander near the end of the table lean forward until his face was 6 inches from the screen, reading a time code, reading it again. She watched the captain on Rose right stop moving. She watched the officer 2 seats down set his pen on the table. She watched the officer beside him uncap his pen, write nothing, and cap it again. She watched Rear Admiral Rowe read the first page of the technical reconstruction and then go back and read the first paragraph a second time. And she watched the color in his face change the way the color in the sky changes before a front moves in, slowly, and then all at once. Nobody said anything for a long time. The door at the back of the room opened. Vice Admiral Gerald Stern entered without an aide, without announcement, in service dress with 3 stars at his collar. He was 61 years old, and he had commanded this fleet for 4 of them, and the room came to attention without being told. Everyone except Aldrin, who was already standing, and Rowe, who rose a half-second after everyone else in a way that Weller would remember for the rest of her career. Stern walked to the screen. He stood in front of it for a long time, reading. When he reached the end of the technical reconstruction, he scrolled back to the sensor log and read 2 entries a second time. Then he turned around. "Who built this?" he said. "Lieutenant Aldrin, sir," said the captain on Rowe's right. His voice had changed since before the drive went in. Stern looked at Aldrin. He held her gaze for a moment, reading something in it that Weller could not name. "How long?" he said. 11 months and 19 days, Aldrin said. "From the night it happened to the 4th submission. Alone?" "Yes, sir." Stern nodded once. He looked at the screen again, at the column of 311 annotated notes running down the right margin. Then he looked at Rowe. Rowe was still holding his folder. He had it pressed flat against his chest with both hands, the way a man holds something when he no longer knows what to do with it and cannot put it down. He met Stern's eyes for approximately 1 second and then looked at the table. "This panel is stood down," Stern said. Not loudly. He didn't need to. He looked back at Aldrin. "I'm told you had a call sign," he said, "in your Naval Special Warfare rotation, before this assignment." Aldrin said nothing. She waited. "Riptide," Stern said, reading from a small card he had taken from his breast pocket. "A briefing card. He had come in prepared. Is that right?" "Yes, sir." Stern turned to face the room. The panel, the senior officers, the 8 men in service dress who had filed into this room an hour ago to close a chapter and were now standing at the center of something else entirely. He looked at them the way a fleet commander looks at a formation before a deployment. Not without feeling, but absolutely clear. This officer submitted a technically complete forensic reconstruction of a classified maritime incident to this command 4 times, he said. 4 times it was returned. 11 months and 19 days of documented solo analytical work. 311 individual cross-references in the primary record. He paused. She is owed an answer. This fleet owes her an answer. He turned back to Aldrin. "Lieutenant," he said, "on behalf of this fleet, you have it." He rendered a formal salute. There was a half-second, 1 full breath. And then every officer in the room came to attention and followed. All 23 of them, some faster than others. The captain on Rowe's right was among the first. Rear Admiral Rowe was last. He came to attention slowly, his folders still pressed to his chest, and when he raised his hand, he did not quite meet Aldrin's eyes, and the salute he held was the longest one in the room by several seconds. Aldrin returned the salute. She held it with the same steadiness she had carried into the room at 0800. Not proud, not relieved, not triumphant, simply present. The way a person is present when they have been doing the right thing for so long that the right thing has become the only mode they know. Stern lowered his hand. He picked up the data drive from the projector station and handed it back to her personally, not to an aide, not across the table, directly, with both hands, the way something is transferred when the transfer matters. "This belongs with the record," he said. "The full record. Under your name." She took it. The room held its formation for one more moment. Weller didn't know who was supposed to move first, and apparently neither did anyone else. And then Stern gave a short nod, and the officers began to file out. They filed past Aldrin without looking away from her the way they had when they came in. One or two gave a short nod of their own. The captain on Roe's right paused for a single moment at the door and looked back at her, and whatever he saw on her face made him look at the floor on the way out. Roe left last among the panel. He did not speak. He walked to the door, and at the threshold he stopped, and he stood there for a moment with his back to the room, and then he walked out into the passageway, and the door closed behind him. The room was empty except for Aldrin, Stern, and Weller, who was still seated by the projector with the cable bag on her lap, unsure whether she had been forgotten or whether she was supposed to stay. Stern looked at her once, a brief look registering her presence, nothing unkind in it, and then he said something quiet to Aldrin that Weller could not hear. Aldrin nodded. Stern left. Weller sat for a moment longer, alone in the room with Aldrin. She should have packed up the cable bag. She should have collapsed the screen. She did neither, because she was still looking at the data drive in Aldrin's hand, the thing that had sat untouched in the fleet's possession for 11 months and 19 days, the thing with 311 cross-reference notes in a column down the right margin, the thing that had been submitted 4 times and returned 4 times until the woman carrying it refused to stop. Aldrin glanced over at her. She noticed for the first time that Weller was still in the room. "You all right, petty officer?" Weller opened her mouth. She had 100 questions and the rank to ask none of them. She closed her mouth. She nodded. Aldrin's expression shifted. Not quite a smile, but something adjacent to one. The closest thing to rest that Weller had seen on her face in the past hour. "Pack up your gear," Aldrin said. "You did good work today." She walked out. Weller sat alone for another minute in the empty briefing room of USS Callaway, in deep harbor, with the screen still lit and the sensor log still running at the top of the file. 0217, Hotel 79er, 14 months ago, and she thought about what it meant to do something right 4 times when the answer each time is no, and to come back a 5th time with the same work in your hands, and sit down at a table full of people who want you to be wrong, and be still. She thought she might carry that for a long time. She packed up the cables. She turned off the screen. She carried it.